Dr. Heidi, I found the best sources to use for my speech. They are totally reliable and credible. I included primary sources and secondary sources. Yes, I am ready. Great. How do you cite them in your speech? I'm Dr. Heidi, and I'm going to use a Pocket Guide to Public Speaking 7th edition presentation PowerPoint as a presentational aid for telling you how to cite sources in your speech. You have to credit your sources within your speech. You want to demonstrate the quality and range of your research, show reliable sources to support your position. It helps you to avoid plagiarism, and it gives you credibility as an ethical speaker. Citing credible sources in your speech enhances your authority, wins support for your viewpoint, enables listeners to locate your sources, and if you're using common knowledge, you don't need to credit it. You want to alert listeners to key source information when you're doing an oral citation during your speech. So, you want to state the author or origin of the source, the type of source, the title or description of the source, and the date of the source. Get as much information or as much of this information in as you can so that you're giving as much information to your audience as you can. That way they can look up the sources if they want to. Alerting listeners to key source information. You don't have to give the complete bibliographic reference. Why? Because it interrupts the flow of your speech and it diverts listeners' attention. You want to present sources in a rhetorically effective manner. So you might say something like, as I read in the article written by Dr. Heidi in November of 2023, you can present that would be presenting in a rhetorically effective manner and not interrupting the flow of the speech. However, if you said, I found an article written by Dr. Heidi Deal on the website www.youtubewriting.com. Oh my gosh, nobody's even listening anymore because I stuttered a few times and I gave the whole web address. Who does that? You want to establish the source's trustworthiness. Just like we discussed a little bit earlier, we're finding the appropriate references. You also want to make sure that you establish the source's trustworthiness. That means the source reliability increases the level of trust between you and your audience. A reliable source can be inaccurate, so you want to make sure to offer a variety of sources, not just one source, but find a couple to corroborate the information. And then, of course, check the source qualifier. Briefly describe the source's qualifications. If I was writing about biology, I wouldn't give me any credit. I mean, I know a little about biology, but honestly, I'm an expert in communication, not in the biological sciences. You want to avoid a mechanical delivery. What does that mean? Change up the wording a little bit. Don't always say, according to the newspaper article I read. Come on. If you say that every time you cite a source in your speech, it's going to be kind of boring. You might say something like, Dr. Deal says in her article about the communication between two people. That's an interesting way to cite something instead of always saying, according to. You might even lead with the claim. Did you know that communication between two or more people is dyadic communication? But once you get between 3 and 12 people, it becomes small group communication. Anything above 12 is public communication. This is the information Dr. Deal shared in her article written for the Journal of Communication. Now that is a good way to cite a source. Note credentials if they inspire trust identify sources that are reputable or from reputable institutions, and reveal how cited statistics were obtained. You want to put them into a context. So if you are citing a census, how is census data collected? It's collected by going door to door and people reporting how many people live in the house, at what address, and then finding out how big the house is, etc., etc., etc. That's a lot of information, and it might not put it into very good context for you, but at least you have an idea that we have to put the statistical data into the study and the research that contained it. For example, once upon a time there was a study that was published that beer is better for you than milk. I don't really want to put beer on my cereal. That sounds disgusting. Again, avoiding mechanical delivery, you want to vary the wording and lead with the claim, not the source. When you are providing a source of a book with 2 or fewer authors, you can use the first and last names, source qualifier, the title, and the date of publication. You could also just use the last names. That would be acceptable. Anything to keep the flow of your speech moving. But provide enough information so that your source is reputable. When you have a book with 3 or more authors, you can use the author's first name and last name, any co-authors, source qualifier, title of publication, and date of publication. Now, when it says co-authors, we don't mean to stand up in front of the audience and say, Dr. Deal, Dr. Miller, et al. That sounds funny. But you could say Dr. Deal, Dr. Miller, and Dr. Jones, plus other co-authors. That sounds a little bit better. Reference work can be presented with the title, the date of the publication, the author or sponsoring organization, and then a source qualifier. An article, either in print or online, should use the author's first and last name, a source qualifier, the title, and the date of the publication. So this would mean, like, if you read something, let's say in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, or another relevant online source, you want to provide the author's name, where you found the data or the article, the title, and the date it was published. Remember to make sure that we know it's relevant information. An online-only magazine, newspaper, or journal should include the author's name, again a source qualifier, the title and date of the publication, and the identification as an online magazine, online newspaper, or online journal. If it's not featured in print ever, then this is the way you go about it. If it is shown in print at some point, then you can use the previous reference. Overview of source types. Again, an organizational website. You want to have the name of the website, source qualifier, the section of the website cited, and the last update. So if you were going to give the About Me General Mills Betty Crocker website, you would definitely want to say that you went to the General Mills website and found in the section About Me how Betty Crocker came to be. And I accessed this information in 2024. A blog should include the name of the blogger, the source qualifier, the affiliated website if applicable, and the date of posting. So if somebody was doing a blog on fishing, and particularly maybe fishing in Canada, Ontario, Loch Sewell, or the lake, right? You wouldn't want to know what fish they are catching last year or the summer before that. You want to provide blog information that's as recent and relevant as possible. So maybe last week's fish that were caught in the lake. Keep that in mind. You can also use television or radio programs. You want to do the name of the program, the segment, the reporter, the source qualifier, and the date aired. This would also work for podcasts. But maybe you're citing an NFL report on ESPN Radio, SiriusXM, any of those. You want to include this information so that we know if we want to go back and find that discussion or the information presented, we can find it. An online video, you want to include the name of the online video source, program, segment, source qualifier, and date aired if applicable. This would be something you might use if you were citing the videos that I'm doing for you on YouTube. Testimony for a layperson or an expert should include the name of the person, source qualifier, context in which the information was offered, and the date the information was offered. So if you are interviewing somebody about the tornado that they just survived, you're going to need to include their name, the location, the source that you got the information from, and then their testimony concerning the tornado and the date that it happened. Interviewing another and other personal communication. Again, name of the person, source qualifier, and the date of the interview, correspondence, email, or memorandum. If you were giving a demonstration speech on how to make lumpia, you might want to include the interview that you did with your neighbor who has made lumpia like 1,000,000 times, so that, and you may actually give an actual number, but that way we know that you got the information from a credible source. That was a lot of information and a lot of different types of sources to go through. Truth be told, you definitely need to include certain things when you're doing an oral citation. An oral citation is just as important as the written citation. So don't wait until the end of your speech and say, these are my sources. That isn't helpful, and it is not the correct way to present the information you cited in your speech. Make sure to practice using oral citations for your speeches.